Clark Brewer here.
Tom Callahan here.
Amy Glassmar here.
Kevin Hine here.
Deirdre Hobson here.
And Birgit Schmidt-Becher here.
Joined by our town planner Cassandra Bayer and our town council Carolyn Murray. All right, so we'll start with the continued items from the last meeting. The first one is PB 10, which is the small change to Article 5 that the zoning board requested. Clark, you were going to talk to Woody. I've heard nothing. What's up?
Yeah, I talked to Woody, and I saw your suggested edits. I told Woody what I thought, and he didn't object to it. That we have a special permit for any exceptions to that requirement. And like I said, he didn't object to it, and we talked about some of the other things, roughly, loosely.
Well, I don't, this was meant to be a simple change for a rare situation, and I don't think we should start rewriting the bylaw to make things easier.
Well, I think it's still pretty straightforward, and
I'm sorry, I disagree with making one thing and then switching it to a special permit.
well, we don't have it now.
That's a philosophical change in the approach of the bylaw, and that's not what this thing was supposed to be about. It's supposed to be simple.
Well, no, I disagree. I mean, I think we don't have it in now. We had it. The judge took it out because it was unusual, and at the time we all said okay. And Woody noticed that it was gone, and I just think that there's those circumstances where the condition can't be met, and for one reason or another, and it should be subject to a special permit instead of a variance if we're putting it back in.
Disagree.
It was unique, according to the judge, or her
I don't
honor.
want to start setting a precedent with something stupid and insignificant about changing things from variances to special permits.
Well, it just makes it so that it's possible. It uses the standard of not being substantially more
It
detrimental.
hasn't been a problem for however many decades it's been in the bylaw. So I don't see the point of changing it.
Well, I mean, I beg to differ. It hasn't been a problem because there's really no option. You have to comply with it, or else, no matter what the circumstances on the ground might be. I mean, Woody said, hey, usually I bring it up, and people, if it's new construction, they have no problem with moving their house back 10 or 15 feet or whatever's required.
All right, well,
Here, can I chime in here?
yeah, I'm just flabbergasted we're even discussing this.
We got a number of things to discuss, and I guess I thought we'd have a resolution here. And why isn't Woody here to voice what the reason is for this? Is that what he felt like you would be doing, Clark?
Well, no, I mean, I was asked to talk to Woody about it. I did. I explained that I had proposed to make the Carolyn, just for your benefit, the additional front setback that was taken out as a part of a simplification and mainstreaming of the bylaw language and all the exceptions, and that Woody noticed it was missing, and I'm suggesting that relief to this added issue be a special permit instead of a variance. I mean, if you say nothing and just put the language in, and you can't comply with it, then it's a variance, right? Then.
Well, even without that, I mean, it's a setback, so any other setback requirement that we've got in the zoning bylaw, if you can't comply with it, it's a variance.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm a little confused because the language that Woody had originally reached out and said was omitted and that he wanted put back in was silent. So it sounds like your conversation has gone even further to the special permit versus variance debate.
Well, I had just suggested, and Tom had written some language at the end that, let's see. Well, I saw his version, and it basically said, and any relief to this front setback be subject to a special permit.
Oh, I haven't seen that language. So
No, and I don't agree with it. I just was indulging you to go speak to Woody about it. But. Right. Anyway, I don't want to beat this to a dead. We have the text that's, well, I don't know if we have the text that's in front of us. Hold on one sec.
So what, excuse me, but
Let me share the screen, so.
what's first off, what's the consequence? And second, what's the resolution?
The consequence is that if you can't meet the dimensional regulations of our bylaw, you have to get a variance that you shouldn't get except in extreme circumstances, unusual circumstances and unique circumstances. And if that's the case, the town has made a judgment about dimensional requirements, and if you can't meet them, you can't get a variance, well, that's just the facts of life. And I'm not in favor of starting to weaken the power of a variance. In however insignificant this situation is, it's a precedent to start doing that. And the bylaw isn't here to start to encourage development all over the place by making it easier.
Well, the bylaw exists as a balance between development pressures and other goals for the community. But I still think
and
that
this unique situation is about a road that's substandard because it doesn't have the state-of-the-art right-of-way that is used now in building a road.
it might be substandard, it might not be, that it probably predates zoning and it's not a subdivision way. And we certainly have a lot of these in Cohasset, a lot of these older subdivision roads.
So is there any middle ground here, or is it yay or?
No, there isn't any middle ground.
Right, so Carolyn, then I'm gonna ask you, can you opine about this from the standpoint of what you see in the other places that you operate? And is this an outlier that we're proposing?
typically setbacks or dimensional requirements are things that are treated as requirements that if you can't meet them, your alternative is a variance. One exception that comes to mind pretty frequently is, a parking requirement. Sometimes a parking requirement is something that rather than that being treated as a dimensional variance, it can be varied as a special permit so that you could, have some relief to it. But I mean, this here is a setback, only the setback, rather than being measured just from your front lot line, is being measured, from the center line of a street of a certain width. It's no different from your rear yard setback or your side yard setback, all of which currently would require a variance.
So what is your recommendation? It seems we're at loggerheads.
No, we're not at loggerheads. We have one person expressing a contrary point of
Well,
view.
we don't have to put
I
this
indulged it.
provision back in the bylaw. I mean, period. That's the issue. Woody said he liked it. And
I'm sorry.
but there's no reason not to just use the standard front setback, whether the way is less than 40 feet or more than 40 feet.
I'm not sensing a consensus on this item. We can take further time to discuss it online, which is just going to delay the other things we need to discuss. Or we could table it for some other time and move forward without the language.
We don't have time to table it. It either goes forward tonight or it doesn't go forward.
I don't
tonight.
think there's enough consensus for it to move forward. I think we move, if someone wants to propose a vote on it, we can vote it up or down.
I'm gonna make a motion that we recommend Article PB 10 as it's written on the screen in front of you.
Can I get clarification as it was previously written without edits? That were put forth by, others outside the planning board? I mean, is that what we're talking about? As it was was originally written, Tom?
Yeah, as it's originally written here.
Yeah.
What's on the screen in front of you.
Well, I just want to make sure, because there's red line strikeouts and such on the screen.
Can I just ask a question? Sorry, I'm not on the screen. I'm not well tonight, so better you not see me. Carolyn,
Yes,
what is on the screen is what, as town council, you're recommending.
well, I want to be clear. This was just text that was deleted from, recent revisions to the zoning bylaw. I wasn't part of some of those discussions and back and forth as to why it was taken out, why, what the rationale was behind it. But when the ZBA or the former ZBA chair raised it and said, gee, I think this has been inadvertently omitted and I'd like to see it put back in, because we come across situations like this from time to time. I drafted this to put it back in where it now seems to make more sense under the revised bylaw. Whether you choose to put it back in or whether you leave it alone. If you leave it alone, then the front yard setback is going to be the same for every lot in the same zoning district, regardless of the width of the road on which that lot fronts.
Thank you. That's really good.
Thank you, Carolyn. That
Welcome.
I guess, so we now need a motion to accept, is that correct?
I think Tom made a motion.
Made a
Okay.
motion that we have a positive recommendation to PB.
All right, so let's call for the question.
It needs to be seconded.
Just second it or don't second it, and then we'll vote. Stop calling for the question. Don't know what.
second.
All in favor, alphabetical, please. Clark,
Clark Brewer, nay.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, nay.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, aye.
Am I going to vote or not?
You can if you'd like. It's not,
But it doesn't count.
Right.
all right.
I'm just gonna abstain. All right, the next one we continued was the land alteration article, which is what, number B4. And Carolyn, this version, which is the one you circulated, I think yesterday, is took into account comments that I had circulated after our meeting last week, correct?
Well, yes and no. I think, Tom, there was some suggestion made that perhaps the purpose and intent section might be revised, but I haven't revised it because I wasn't given any particular direction on that. I did take out, just thinking,
Yeah, there's one provision I said to take out that
yes, I'm just looking through the,
it was, I think it was down here, yeah, this thing here. This subparagraph 6 should be out,
number 6 comes out.
so I'm gonna do that on this version here, so. This. Okay, so,
Question,
yes,
did
I sent an email.
Yes, I'm gonna put it up on the screen in a moment, so,
Okay.
all right. I guess I have to stop the share. You can't share two things at once, can you?
No,
I'll stop that one.
you can mail it to somebody, but you can't share it like
Oh,
that.
yeah, all right, so, hold on. I'm going to have to. All right, this is Birgit's email. Um.
Okay.
All right, well, let's do the first one. Exposed ledge face alteration is a separate definition. I don't,
So right now it's lumped together with earth removal in general.
because that's what it is. It's earth removal. It's a form of earth removal.
Tom, can you clarify,
The overall intent of this reform was to simplify the bylaw and make it easier to use. It was filled with junk and gobbledygook, and I just don't want to start seeing us adding back stuff. I think the bylaw is clear in what it's regulating and how it's regulating it, including ledge removal. But, and then the next suggestion is clearing of trees. No, it's not just clearing of trees, it's clearing of all ground cover and as well as trees. It was always intended that way, so
That's not quite clear. So like, if you look down in clearing, that's probably why I started to have that idea, because clearing, if you, yeah, kind of like, I would need to look at my own version. Can you like scroll further down? So clearing says, clearing of trees, and it does not mention, in the definition at least, it does not mention any earth removal.
so one of
no,
the,
So,
hold on. Clearing and earth removal are two different things.
okay,
Clearing is the removal of vegetation. Earth removal
Okay.
is the removal of earth.
right. Okay.
It's pretty. Anyway, I'm sorry, where was the screen share?
So
Now what happened to it?
do you want, we can leave that.
No, can you see your email now again?
I can see my email. Yes, yes.
All right, I
can.
just want to make sure it's fine. So anyway, thoughts on this first paragraph about changing these definitions? I don't think they need to be changed.
Well, it might be clearing of vegetation, as we don't have it as a definition in this section, nor is it a definition in the main body of the zoning bylaws. So, clearing of vegetation probably makes sense as a descriptor, not necessarily as a definition.
The bylaw has a definition of clearing.
I just looked and I didn't find it.
It's under
Yeah,
section
it's the
B.
first.
It's under section B, definitions, and it does just refer to trees. It should be all vegetation, but
so
such
as
is life.
proposing,
It's
we
about
are
trees.
going in opposition of the conservation, which is beginning to enable people to remove noxious materials and non-native
Oh,
species.
okay.
What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
When you say earth removal and clearing,
They're
I
two
am-
different concepts.
yes, I understand that. I am focusing on clearing. And what I'm saying is that if we're going to use the term clearing, we have to recognize that other boards are making changes to their bylaw or their regulations that say things that are very specific. So for example, when people are faced with a field of poison ivy, the prospect of clearing it under what you're doing would say that they can't do that.
It does, I'm correcting myself that if you look at the definition of clearing, I can't screen share twice, but it says the
I see
complete,
it.
complete removal of trees 4 inches in diameter or greater measured at 5 feet above existing grade.
Well, then why are you using clear? Why wouldn't you just use tree removal?
Oh my God. It's been in the bylaw for 15, well, however many years this bylaw has existed.
Yeah, but Tom, other people are changing their regulatory.
Well, how do I know that?
Well, because I'm telling you,
Oh, who's doing it?
the Conservation Commission.
Yeah, who has their own thing to do, their own bylaws and regulations to work at. And if they are protecting more than we are, good for their bylaw. I'm happy for them. Do you want to pull up the definition that they use and you want to replace it and so they match? That's fine. Pull it up. Right now, go look for it and pull it up. I'm sorry if I'm asking people to come here with, you know, Brigitte at least has sent an email around with some suggestions of actual text. The purposes section, everybody said, well, we want to take a crack at looking at the purposes section. Well, where's the change? Does anybody have one? If not, then we're not dealing with it. That's fine. But you know, I don't know what to say. I'm just frustrated that there's either this 11th hour stuff when this has been before us for weeks and months, or you want to suggest a change, come here with the change. I don't have the time to search every bylaw, and I've done enough searching of things to get this to where it is today. Can you please look up with the Conservation Commission how they're defining clearing? If they have a definition that's specific to it, and then we can plot it in here.
I'll do that.
Please, thank you. Let's get back to where's the email.
I mean, I can quickly see like what my motivation was for bringing up the exposed ledge face alteration separately, and kind of because I do think it may help to distinguish between mere kind of earth removal and then having to deal with chipping or blasting ledge in order to achieve kind of the same kind of clearing. So we have earth, we have trees, or vegetation in general. I would like to clearing up vegetation maybe better, but anyhow.
With all due respect, again, clearing and earth removal are two different concepts, and the definition of earth removal that I'm now staring at says the extraction, removal, alteration of materials, including soil, loam, sand, gravel, or stone. It also includes the excavation of, chipping of, or other alteration or removal of exposed ledge face, which then becomes the next defined term. It's all in there already. I don't know how to make it more clear to people. I don't want to write a bylaw to a 4th grade level.
You don't have to be disparaging about it.
I'm not trying to
You're
be
obviously frustrated.
I'm not trying to be disparaging, but the things that everybody's saying is here already in the definition, clearly. I just don't, I don't know, because frankly, Brigitte, and from comments from last week, I think I put the context of these comments in a larger context that I think some of you want to regulate further than exposed ledge. That you want to stop all kinds of ledge removal, whether it's subsurface or not. And I warned against over-regulating last week, and I'm going to warn about it again.
Well, it might make the bylaw difficult to pass on the floor of town meeting.
Make it extremely difficult to pass.
Okay.
And the progress of.
But we want to keep at least what we have. So and to get the minor changes in that we have already worked out. So.
Well, Birgit, it may be that that we go along with what Tom has edited, and like the rest of our bylaws, if if what he's put together seems to work well or ends up being problematic, it'll be obvious as a part of our special permit process what's working, what worked and what didn't work. So we can make revisions. Certainly it's good to try to anticipate the special permit process and what we're trying to do philosophically as a part of this bylaw and protecting ledge to the extent that it's practical.
Yeah,
And recall that this bylaw has been used once in the last 5 years. Just once. And I would suggest to you that the reason that it's only been used once is because it has exceptions to make it essentially meaningless.
Right.
And so what the thrust of this amendment is to not wordsmith the definition of ledge, but to take away some of the exceptions so that we're starting to actually regulate more of what's going on a property like down at Cunningham Bridge.
okay.
It's been used once in the 5 years that I've been here, and I don't think it was used any time in the 3 years prior to that.
Okay. I mean, I don't want to, yeah, kind of this is fine. This is definition point, right? And we can leave that as is. That's not gonna change, kind of much. It
Oh, I know.
just it kind of just draws more attention to ledge. But if it's clear that way, then I'm fine with that as well. The just for the purpose section, and kind of before, kind of the other point
That I like. I'm sorry that I was anticipating, based on our comments last week, somebody was going to do a wholesale rewrite of the purpose section, and so it's not here, but I think this unique ledge-based, putting these words in front of the word topography is fine. I think there's no problem with it at all.
Yeah, all I'm trying to do is draw more attention. I mean, you got that by now that I'm pretty much kind of interested in keeping the ledges as they are, but kind of to draw as much attention to it, and kind of make clear we are having our arguments because of those kind of new unique ledge-based topography. The other point, though, if you want to kind of scroll further down, what I tried, and I mean, it may also fall under your, kind of, this is 11 o'clock changes or additions, so thinking of limiting, kind of, we're limiting the tree removals, so the vegetation removal to a certain percentage. And I was just wondering whether there is any chance that we could limit the ledge removal, kind of similarly. So that's probably also, and kind of why I wanted to bring the ledge, kind of as a separate one, and then we can limit it. But it may go, kind of, if there's any idea of, and Kevin, you probably have a lot better understanding there, kind of than I do, of what is a reasonable amount that we could limit it to, if at all. But that's
I'll just say this about that. The original version in 2016 that I wrote had a limit. It had two limits about how much from the surface you could remove and how deep into like a ledge, like on a cliff, like it happened with that driveway on Beach Street. And we debated it ad nauseum back then about how that would actually get enforced and measured. I think it's a difficult thing to measure. And if we're going to keep the exception, if we're going to keep the exception for the main house and the utilities, then I don't think we can keep to like a 5, 10, or even 15, 20% limit. I don't know that we can't. And if we are going to, again, this is where we could do it. We could do it. I'm just worried about it over-regulating, and if we start preventing people from putting a house up just because there's ledge on the property, there's ledge on all over the place now. We're going to get into dangerous territory of taking away all development opportunity on the property.
But Tom, the exceptions, they aren't a prohibition. I mean,
No, I know they're not a prohibition, but I don't think they
it's a
can
special
be.
permit review.
I
and-
know that,
Wh-
I know that, but
And
I'm,
while the
I'm,
special permit might be a pain for anybody who the exceptions don't work for, it doesn't say you can't remove ledge that's problematic for what you want to do with your property.
I agree, but I think them trying to, in the same vein, trying to put a percentage limit of ledge that you can remove is also going to get into prohibition territory that I think is troubling for
Yeah.
us, just in the state of takings law in Massachusetts, you know, what
Yeah.
Massachusetts zoning law does. I would love to prohibit it, but I don't think we can. And I don't think it will, you know, we
But-
had to make compromises to get the citizens, what was the citizens petition passed, and we compromised it, in my opinion, far too much. And now this is trying to ratchet it back more to what the citizens petition was in 2016 by taking out some of these exceptions and getting them into the regulatory process. That's all. And it is, and Clark's correct. It'll be a special permit, which is not exactly, you know, an absolute no. But if you tell somebody you can't remove more than 5% of the ledge covering your property, yeah, that's gonna be a no in a lot of cases.
That's a real number.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's problematic for us to go that far.
But somehow it would be nice to have limits on, you know, kind of granting special permits, because otherwise it's kind of like a moot point of, you know, having a special permit process. If it's always granted anyhow, it's just red tape. But it should have some kind of, you know, kind of measure according to which it makes sense to grant, like let them put another garage up or a shed or a pool, so that it just makes geological sense, topography sense, not only from an aesthetic perspective, but you know, kind of look at, you know, kind of again, Cunningham Bridge. I mean, they took out basically all the ledge there was, absolutely all. And so that's kind of like, that's not really what we want, is it?
So can I ask Carolyn what her experience has been on how you construct limits that not only seem reasonable, but have normal existence in this situation? And when I mean normal existence, that is other people use defining terms as to what they're talking about.
Well, I think you always have to use defining terms as to what you're talking about, whether, you know, whether it's an earth removal bylaw, a land alteration bylaw. Sometimes it's a stormwater and land alteration bylaw combined. They all put, you know, define what are we talking about and what are the restrictions or how is it going to be allowed. And you do all of that. You do lay all of this out here in the land alteration bylaw. You know, and I think, you know, for looking at Birgit's email here, you know, like adding that new subparagraph 3 to the purpose section to include exposed ledge face alteration. Yeah, that is part of one of the purposes of this bylaw, is to address that and to regulate it.
All right, so would you recommend that, or would you deter us from putting some kind of explicit metric on this particular request?
I don't know that I would put a metric in this particular request, because most of your land alteration is going to be driven by someone's desire to do something else. They want to build something, they want to develop something, they want to add on to an existing structure. I don't know of anyone who's going to go out and start clearing land just for the sake of clearing the land. Usually it's preparatory to some other project. So I don't think we want to be in a situation where we say you can only clear a certain percentage of your land and then find that that's at odds with, based on the zoning district that it's in, perhaps a larger footprint of development would be allowed than the footprint of clearing. And how do we square those two? Are we now going to force people to, again, does it become a variance where they have to go to the zoning board of appeals and say, I need to be able to clear more of my land because my intent is to, build that multifamily development or put up that new self-storage, complex, whatever it happens to be. I don't think anyone's going to be altering land just for the sake of altering land. There's always going to be some underlying project that it serves. And I think those other projects have setbacks and limits built in.
And the clearing limits were put in because that's a more easily measured metric. And yes, if somebody wants to exceed those clearing limits on a new lot, they're gonna have to go get a variance. And, but the ledge, I think, it's just more problematic to regulate the quantity of ledge. The old earth removal bylaw had what, Mark? It was 10,000 square feet of material. I think it was 10,000 cubic yards couldn't be removed, you couldn't remove in excess of 10,000 cubic yards. When we amended it to this, we got rid of that. But 10,000 is a lot, but I just, I mean, in the, hold on, I was just looking at it. I wish I could share two screens at once, but I can't. But anyway. In the description of the limits on earth removal and alteration of exposed ledge face, which is subsection F. Well, I thought it said something else. Maybe I'm reading that somewhere else. Hold on one second. I'm sorry. I mean, I think the only thing that you can suggest is saying when you're discussing the limits is that, was this also the bylaw we were going to explain some preferences, or was that another bylaw? Remember last week I said there was going to be some maybe inclusion of preferences in the bylaw? Was it this one or another one? Because I'm thinking out
I
loud.
don't remember.
I'm sorry?
I said, I don't remember. At
Yeah, I'd
last
have to
week's
find-
meeting, I did bring up that perhaps we could, instead of saying any ledge, we could quantify any ledge, that's, visible from a public way, or ledge that's a certain area. I used examples from in front of my house where I have two ledge outcroppings. One's 5 feet high and 200 square feet. The other's probably 8 feet high and 400 square feet. But because it seems like any ledge, like lots of the voters at town meeting have ledge in their yard. So all of a sudden, if they're thinking, if I want to knock down on some ledge in my yard so that my lawnmower doesn't hit it by 6 inches, or use use Amy's husband's rock melter liquid, then you'd have to come in for a special permit, and that doesn't seem fair. So I had made a suggestion about quantifying what the focus is here, in terms of the ledge, area, volume, what might be the most interest to the voters at town meeting.
Somebody else jump in, I'm just looking for something, so,
And the other thing I brought up with the new languages, there's like 3 or 4 places where it says earth removal in excess of the limits set forth below, and then ledge face in excess of the limits set forth below. And again, there's nothing that's quantifiable. It's just any ledge that's visible. And I guess my concern is that folks would just buy a truckload of mulch and cover up whatever ledge is exposed if it's minimal. Like an inch above grade. I mean, the big question is, what is of significance that we want to try to preserve and encourage homeowners, developers, and anybody else to leave it in place and build around it like it's been done for hundreds of years here in Cohasset.
The 2 examples that I heard were Cunningham Bridge, preventing an issue like we're seeing there, and then Beach Street, which was years ago. And both of those are exhibit A's and B for what we don't want to see. Now,
And the ledge was from it was visible from the water, but the upland ledge, the non-conservation commission jurisdiction ledge, was all covered with dirt and trees and but that's what we see as what's been removed now.
That's right.
Go ahead. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm talking out loud.
So it was invisible below grade ledge, and that seems to be the problematic in the example.
But it could have been reasonably anticipated. The topographic high, even though it was covered with earth, the reason it was high next to a vibrant, dynamic ocean is because it's got ledge underneath it. And I guess, that was reasonably anticipated, but we didn't have a mechanism to do anything with it regard to Cunningham Bridge. And now we're left with them carting out truckload and blasting and putting a wall in because they blasted right up to what they could setback wise. And it's caused angst. And with this board, and that sounds like perhaps in the neighborhood and with the neighbors.
Yeah, it's an extreme example. Actually, someone out of the blue brought it up to me today, that particular location.
But, the reason there was a topographic high there, even though it was covered with trees and, smaller, lower trees at that and brush, and it had cover on it, earthen cover, is because of the bedrock underneath. And, that's what we see around town. There's a reason why we have these topographic highs. It's because there's in most instances, a bedrock component to it near the surface or just below the surface in the remaining lots that we have this. So if this is going to be sold to town, it's got to be, what are the exhibits or what are we trying to prevent? And if we can't do that, then we're just spinning our wheels here and we're not going to get anywhere, and we just need to move on to the next thing and leave it for another day or another variance or another rewriting of regulations here. And I'll turn it back to the audience here. I've been listening to what's been talked about here, and I understand the limits of it, and I understand the limits of enforcing it, and I understand the intent, and there was intent in having ledge being regulated years ago, and there was some interest in doing that, and I think that idea was just to use that and move forward. But if we don't feel like we have a mechanism to do so, then we may just need to drop this.
I looked at the email I circulated last week, and yes, I said to everyone that with this one, there was the possibility that we were going to rewrite the purposes section, and I'll just shoot you up there again. I put in 2 pieces of language that Birgit suggested in the purposes in that first paragraph. Okay. We also said in that and discussed that night and put in that memo that we were going to discuss the possibility of stating preferences, and this goes to and preferences was going to Clark's comment that ledge removal, how much ledge removal is allowed is not quantified. So going back to the section that deals with this. It tells you the activities that are gonna be subject to the special permit when earth removal and alteration of ledge face is involved. So now I'm suggesting, since nobody's come here tonight with a preference language, is suggesting that we add this preference language at the end. And in combination with removing the exemptions to the accessory structures, we will now regulate exposed ledge removal when it's dealing with accessory structures. And to further limit it, what's removed, I would suggest this sentence or some variation thereof. And Carolyn, you chime in too if it's objectionable.
I don't think it's objectionable at all. I thought actually had some similar language elsewhere in here that if you had a permit, you were certainly allowed to remove as much earth as is necessary for whatever that building permit would allow.
I think that might have been in the exemptions for
But
what,
that was for the primary structure.
But wouldn't we want it to apply to both the primary as well as the accessory structure?
Not by default.
The primary has a exemption, would qualify as the exemption.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't even get a special permit if it's an attached garage and a house.
yeah, the primary structure remains in the construction of the primary remains an exemption.
But Tom, if we have that new sentence in
So
there,
so here's where it's, so where earth removal is necessarily excavated in connection with the lawful construction of primary structure and sewer system, other utilities, provided that the quantity, blah, 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 blah. No, wait a minute. Provided that the volume in cubic yards of material removed does not exceed the volume required to build a foundation in the basement of the primary structure. So yeah, we put that limit on that too.
but that's where we put the limit first, right? If we
Right,
have,
well, so yeah, you're exempted, but you're exempted from the permit scrutiny for your house and your utilities. But we still say in there that you can't remove more than you need to build those things. So there's that limitation. Now I'm suggesting up here where something that's non-exempt, again, we state something similar, that you're only going to be able to do what's necessary to build what might be permitted.
but then they can just ask for a special permit and it's basically granted right away.
Stop assuming that special permits are granted. If a planning board has grounds to say no, that it's substantially more detrimental, the planning board should do that. Now, do most planning boards have those kinds of guts? No. Sometimes the case is obvious that it's substantially more detrimental. Those are rare, but you know, on the close ones, planning boards in this town and other towns, yeah, they might grant them, but sometimes they have the power to say no. And so don't automatically assume it's something. It's usually that way, but I wouldn't automatically assume that. And now if Cunningham, that property at Cunningham Bridge came before us, now with this, we would have been doing a ledge removal special permit. We did not do one on that property. All we did was large home review. And we would be doing one, and we now would have some limitations as to how much they'd be removing. And if they were still proposing what seems to be going on out there, we might say, hey, that's substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. So, you know.
Tom, don't scroll up. If you can just keep this on here, what you have highlighted in yellow, I find unwieldy the way it's written. Can you just say will we require a special permit instead of entertain in consideration of? I don't understand what that means.
All right. The paragraphs tells you what's going to require a special permit.
Right.
All right. And so then this is just saying, and that special permit may be granted, but this is just trying to put some limit on what could be granted. Again, I can go back to this language down here. I
I just, if it's gonna require a special permit, then let's say it's gonna require a special permit, not
Yeah, but I'm
entertain
trying
the
to-
consideration of. I don't understand that.
I'm trying to find language here to answer everybody else's comments about quantifying what we would allow, even if we allowed a special permit, that we put some limits on it nevertheless, even if we're granting a special permit. So that people don't go willy-nilly and saying, okay, I gotta remove this ledge to build this driveway and this tennis court, but I also want to remove that ledge over there where I want to plant the lawn. No, no on the lawn.
I think we need to be a
That's what
little,
this- Now, I'm,
Sorry.
I'm just trying to find the language that'll work for it. Maybe if I copy this and.
let's take Cunningham Bridge again, right? Kind of, so maybe we can be, kind of a little bit more, kind of descriptive in terms of, if they would, with that sentence, I would guess they would say, okay, yeah, we need the driveway, and the driveway is when they designed a huge driveway going into the back so that they need to push back
Right.
all of that ledge, right? So, but we need to kind of say that you can't do that because that's a lot more ledge taken off in relation to the maybe like 1 foot deep driveway structure. So it needs to be kind of exactly in relation to how much kind of depth you need for your driveway. So like, yeah.
So
You know what I
Carolyn, can
Oops. Oops.
What's
Sorry,
that?
I don't know why.
There's an echo.
Yeah, Amy, you
All
need
right, so
I mean, I think Tom's revisions, and based on Birgit's comments, I think they're okay. I don't think we're gonna perfect this. I think we're gonna, if we can get it passed, I think that people at town meeting are gonna understand why we are addressing this. And, again, if we have to perfect it over time, we find some things that just don't work right, like all of the exceptions that Tom had previously. We can make those changes as, at another town meeting.
all right, just this time I'm taking the language that's
that we have the same for the as
the language in the exception for this primary structure. is
Yeah.
adapted review. So if a special permit is granted, the quantity, volume, and cubic yards of material removed at the surface and below grade shall not exceed that. No, actually, shall not exceed that. Actually, sorry. Doing this on the fly. Right. So there's a quantity limit.
Yeah.
I like that better than the yellow first one that I wrote.
Okay.
Clear?
Yeah, I think that's good.
All right. All right. Is that it for this then? I don't know, Carolyn, are any of your notes something we have to address?
I don't think so. I think you probably did address some of these at your meeting last week. I think there are a couple of small edits that Cassandra and I can just work on, like with some dates that need to be filled in, that type of thing.
I do have
Alright.
that date if you'd like to fill it in now. Was December
okay.
13th of 2021.
What? 2021?
I looked at the 2017 and it looks like it was withdrawn at that time. and then came back in 2021.
That's,
Sounds right.
so agricultural and activities in existence on December. What was the date? 13?
December 13th.
All right. All right. All right. Then I'm gonna make a motion that we,
Well, Tom, do you just want to see if there's any public comment? I don't know if there's anybody out there.
yeah, that's my apologies. Anybody out there? I
You
can't-
have one person in attendance and they have not raised their hand.
Okay.
I had one tiny addition to, right there where you are with the, underlined yellow, in yellow, section, like, but only if connected to the primary structure as defined above. So that, yeah, kind of, it's not taken here, kind of as a reading for, well, connected to the primary structure. No, but we gave pretty, kind of clear definitions of what attachment means. Okay.
All right.
Can I just
Um,
ask on this one too? We've got driveway crossed out, but we're obviously allowing like other utilities and things like that. Do we want to keep driveway crossed
No.
out?
Yes,
Okay,
it's one of the intents of this. is-
That was one of the big ones, and kind of that came out of the Cunningham Bridge.
Okay.
Design, yeah.
All right, so without further ado, make a motion that we recommend PB4 as edited in the text that's on the screen tonight.
Second,
Second, all right, thank you. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Alphabetical roll
Did you
call?
make a motion and get a second?
Yes,
Okay,
so all in favor of recommending this? Start alphabetically. Clark,
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Oh, we lost Amy, right?
you're
So you
muted.
can vote.
Amy, where are you?
She's muted.
Yeah, she was echoing.
Sorry, I.
Okay.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, I.
And Birgit Schmidt-Besch, aye.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so now, we're gonna move to the three articles that were scheduled for the public hearings to begin tonight. Cassandra, if you don't mind reading the notice, please.
I can read the notice. Also just a clarification, the two that you guys had opted not to move forward. We were able to edit the public hearing notice, so
Oh,
we don't
sorry,
have to
you
worry
have
about
make
those
a
two.
motion
It's
for that?
just the development impact.
Oh, okay. Good, great.
But I will read the public hearing notice. Pursuant to Section 5 of MGL Chapter 40A, the Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Zoom platform, webinar ID 897-3508-3668, password 471753, on Wednesday, October 16th, 2024, at 6:30 p.m. on the following proposals to amend the Cohasset zoning bylaws. PB5, new Article 11, implementation of development impact bylaw. Proposed changes include: 1, creates a development impact bylaw to ensure that certain development and infrastructure impacts are addressed and mitigated for projects requiring a special permit and/or site plan review. The full text and maps, if applicable, of the proposed amendments are available for viewing at the town clerk's office, Cohasset Town Hall, 41 Highland Avenue, Cohasset, Mass. 02025 during regular business hours, Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Friday, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. Electronic copies of proposals can be found on the Town of Cohasset website, https://www.cohassetma.org/214/planning board. Any person interested or wishing to be heard on the proposed amendments should attend the public hearing at the time designated. Signed, Thomas J. Callahan, Chair, Planning Board.
Great, thank you, Cassandra.
Mhm.
Let me find that on the screen. All right, so, for what it's worth here, I have played with it to adapt it to becoming Article 11. Carolyn, do you want to run through whatever changes have emerged?
I actually haven't made any changes, but we did get an email earlier today from Amy with a couple of, for the most part, I would say minor edits. I went through and compared, and some of them are just, language changes, which are perfectly fine. The only question that was raised of any real substance had to do with paragraph B on applicability. And we had talked about
Which
that.
one, just so for
Yep.
the organization of the bylaw, applicability would be section 11.2 now.
Okay. And as you see on there that we had in the draft, that the applicability of this bylaw would include any residential or commercial subdivision creating 3 or more lots. And in Amy's comments today, the question was, why 3? The only other thing too, in this particular section, and I don't know if this came up in any of the comments from Woody Chittick, but Woody did reach out to me about this and said, if we're going to make the development of significant impact apply to any project that requires a special permit, did we mean to also include those like single and 2-family houses that are pre-existing non-conforming structures or lots, that anytime they want to put an addition on, they need a special permit under Article 8 of the zoning bylaw. And I did tell Woody I would bring that to the board's attention, because I don't think it was your intent to think that any sort of alteration of a pre-existing non-conforming residential structure would also require, would be subject to this bylaw. So one proposed or friendly edit I would suggest for paragraph B would be to exclude, and we can do it either broadly, excluding any special permit required under Article 8, or we could do it a little bit more narrowly to exclude any alterations to pre-existing non-conforming single or 2-family homes that would require a special permit under Article 8. And really the only distinction there is, if someone's looking to alter a pre-existing non-conforming commercial structure, they're going to have to come in for a special permit regardless.
So my let me
Say that again. I'm sorry, Amy. Hold on. Say that again.
I think the intent of Woody's concern was that he didn't want people who are looking to alter single and 2-family homes to have to be subject to the development of significant impact bylaw.
Right.
So if we said, right, but if we just broadly exempt any special permits required under Article 8, the problem with that is, of course, that there could also be some commercial properties that fall under Article 8. So we could more narrowly tailor it to make sure that we are only exempting single family and 2 families. We could just exempt any residential structures requiring a special permit under Article 8.
That's what I just threw in right here.
Okay.
So can I speak to
Mhm.
why I asked the question why?
Well, let's first deal with Woody's thing before we get to the number of lots in the subdivision. All right, hold on one sec, one thing at a time. Because Woody's point was well taken about this Article 8 issue, so I don't think we'd want to necessarily exempt a commercial project under Article 8 because that could be a fairly substantial addition or alteration, so if there's a better way to word this, I think this is what we want to really do right here.
It says except residential projects, so it wouldn't exclude commercial. But
Yeah.
it the same is under 40A Section 6. I mean, it's the same basic existing non-conforming
Right,
residential.
Right, the only thing is, under chapter 48, section 6, it doesn't require special permit. The
Yeah.
statute just refers to a finding, but our bylaw makes the finding subject to a special permit. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure we weren't capturing more projects out there than we intended with this.
Okay,
I think the language you just put in, Tom, is fine.
okay, all right, now the purple language is Amy's question. So I know we've discussed it. I think I probably had a wider discussion with the zoning board on this because we haven't had our public hearing, but you know, through our discussions on this board, I know we've talked about examples up in the Howe Road, Tag Lane area where they haven't been subdivisions under the subdivision control law, but yet there's multiple lots being developed simultaneously and causing some impact. And again, in the caution of over-regulating and going into territory we should not go or could become problematic, this should be some dividing line. And the chances of a 1 or 2 lot development having substantial impact on infrastructure or the other values that this bylaw protects versus anything that's larger. And you know, 3 or more for us in Cohasset is large, you know. Other towns would think that's a tiny subdivision, but we saw that the lots on Black Horse Lane created, you know, the potentially significant impact. So that's the thought behind picking a number, was just that being realistic on what's going to create a potential impact that requires going through the process of this bylaw as opposed to being overly burdensome. You know, we are going to capture large home reviews. So that is going to capture a single house. But as I think we've discussed, the likelihood that the board would require any type of substantial mitigation is probably nil to none, but at least you're going to have the opportunity to ask the question. But
We
two
had a
other
project which we were faced with, if you remember, that was, I'm looking for it right now, where it was an old house and they had a garage on a road and they had and the question was to move the garage, and the neighbors came and said, if you move the garage, you're going to create a amazing drainage problem for us. And that project did not go forward. So I don't think that we should say something, if we can confine it to subdivisions. First off, that's a challenge. But the second thing is that there are instances where there are houses that are very large. If they're modified, they may want to expand and alter the drainage. They might tear up the road because of the ways in which they plan to renovate the facility. I guess
and if it's large home review, and if it's a large home review project, we're going to capture that in this bylaw.
We didn't.
We did.
Well, we
Right.
did from the standpoint.
Hobart.
What was that? I don't know.
Sorry, Tom, that was Hobart Lane.
Okay, the previous phrase in this section, which I'll now highlight in a new color, find another, let me find another color, green. There we capture projects that are gonna come under large home review. But if we, you know, again, this says the word subdivision, which has a legal meaning. You know, if we get somebody who comes in and Form A's a lot and creates two, are we really thinking that the added new house is going to create a significant impact on town infrastructure or town values? Probably not. And again, if we apply a bylaw in such a way that we're going to unreasonably prevent development of a lot, we could run into a takings problem. I just, again, I love the thought, but at the same time, I think we need to be realistic and not tend to overregulate. This is a new concept for a town of our size, so we're doing some groundbreaking things to begin with, but we know that in projects like Black Horse Lane, it would be nice if we had the tool in our pocket to use rather than just rely on negotiations and the good faith of a developer to negotiate with us. But anyway, anybody else have some thoughts on this?
Well, we talked about the subdivision and Carolyn, as a part of the discussion, brought up, you know, how do you deal with that? And I think that's what brought about the 3 or more lot threshold, which is probably, I mean, if you're doing it, like you said, I think if you're doing a 2-lot division under A&R, that's probably a more likely scenario than a real subdivision that's got only one more lot. You know, in fact, the A&Rs could be 5 lots. It's just if there isn't enough frontage. If it's and this is only for residential or commercial subdivisions. So a division, an A&R would be excluded. I mean, if it was 10 lots that were created as a part of an A&R, it still wouldn't be captured here. I mean, we could say division or subdivision, I suppose, for those circumstances, but I still think the 3-lot threshold is meaningful. And the mitigation is not an absolute requirement. It's based on the circumstances.
I'm trying to think that your example with Deirdre chimed in, it was Hobart Lane. I'm not recalling the exact example, but I mean, today, if somebody was to, during their construction process, adversely impact town infrastructure, a truck broke a pipe in the road because it was too heavy, they're not gonna get away scot-free on that. There's ways to get that back. I mean, you know, when the contractor broke the gas line redoing the Brownbrook Bridge going to my neighborhood, you know, they had to compensate the town to deal with that. There is recourse, there's litigation, there's insurance claims, there's all that kind of stuff. If the driveway, if a new structure was affecting a neighbor and creating a nuisance, like a drainage, you know, changing the water flow. Carolyn, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know that we could get involved in that anyway. I mean, this kind of, I know there's language later on that we discussed the last time we discussed this bylaw that if we do order mitigation on a private property, we have to get the permission of the private property owner. We can't just order it. But if it's, you know, an example of that would have been had we required a sidewalk to go on the old part of Black Horse Lane, the only way the sidewalk could have only been placed on private property. But I think it's different that if there's a drainage impact on a neighbor, That's the sole problem. I don't know that we necessarily get involved in that. And I don't know that this bylaw lets us get involved in that.
Not really. You might capture something like that possibly under the stormwater bylaw. But again, it's gonna depend on whether or not it triggers the stormwater bylaw. Otherwise, unfortunately, if it's just one private property owner, literally discharging water or water skating off of one property onto another, it's a private nuisance matter. But no, it wouldn't typically be something that we would capture under a bylaw like this.
Yeah,
So in Cohasset, we have a regulation that does not allow you to have water on your property spread onto somebody else's property.
yeah, that goes back in Anglo-American law for 1,000 years.
Well, all I'm saying is, when they make a change in the landscape and it creates runoff that then floods someone's garage, why is that why are you saying that that's okay in this
Not sa-
instance?
Well, again, we can't regulate everything. And that is a private matter between the two private property owners. It's not affecting a town resource or a town matter of infrastructure or a town safety issue like the need for a sidewalk would, because of the volume of additional people and traffic that are going to be generated by a project. Our reach is limited, as a municipality, there's only so much we can do. And again, I've argued here tonight of not weakening the bylaw by, undermining variances, but at the same time, we have to be cautious about going too far to where we can't go or shouldn't go. We're not going to prevent every harm to every person by this. And, I'm usually not super sympathetic to financial burden arguments, but to put every single family house development into the potential of doing this, well, they would have to do the development impact statement, and then whether the commission, whether the board decides to actually order any mitigation would be the next step. But I don't know that we need to do it when the small, again, we're going to run into this with large home reviews because we're going to have this power with large home reviews. But I think we have to be, very cautious and very realistic about what would be the potential adverse impact of a single family home at a time. Multiple houses, yes, because that's going to add a certain volume of traffic, if nothing else, and pedestrians. So, but a single family house, I think we just need to be really wary of going too far with this.
But not only that, Tom, to emphasize your point, it's not just a single family house. It would be a single family house, say, under the large house review threshold.
Right. All right. Now, Clark provides an interesting example, and this doesn't happen very often. There's no limit on how many lots you can do by A&R, correct? If I'm not.
No, as long as they have frontage.
Right, so if let's look again to Black Horse Lane on the other side of the street. The other side of the street, we all know, has developed, I don't know, what is it, 4, 5, 6 lots potentially, or actually, and they've all been developed by A&R. They were all created by A&Rs. Now, we know with the time of the A&R, we're not seeing a structure being proposed, but they will be coming. So, for the rare circumstances where we're going to see something over one single lot being created by an A&R, which seems to be typical for Cohasset, with Black Horse Lane being the example, should we be a little broader with this definition of subdivision?
You mean change it to division or subdivision?
Well, yeah, change it to any subdivision subject to the subdivision control law in chapter 325 of the bylaw. and any ANR that will
Well,
create.
that's a division.
Yeah, I don't know if just a reference to the subdivision control law, does that capture the ANR part of the statute? It's in the it's in the subdivision control law.
Right, but it's also, I think I would agree with Clark on the language to say a subdivision or division of land creating 3 or more lots, because when you look at the definition of subdivision, an ANR plan is not a subdivision. So I don't want anyone to
Right.
start to get cute with the language.
All right, so here's this, I would capitalize subdivision, so not what we mean, as a defined statutory term. And then put in or other division
Or division.
of land. Creating 3 or more lots, is that legally acceptable, Carol?
Yep.
Okay. Everybody understand that?
Yeah. Hey, we might not be at this point, but last time I mentioned that the development community might be nervous about this bylaw. Not that they really have a strong voice on the floor of town meeting, but I mused or wondered if we should express a threshold for what the mitigation costs, what a maximum mitigation cost might be. And I think, Tom, you got confused with unit prices, so many lineal feet of sidewalk, but really I was talking about if this is truly an impact mitigation review, impact mitigations usually are relative to the size of a project. So if say 20 years down the road, sewer runs right down 3A, somebody wants to build a 200,000 square foot office building, and whatever the value of that might be, $40 million or whatever, are we talking about whatever we can get out of these guys? 10% of construction value, 4 million, or 5%, or is this too hairy a thing to even discuss?
So if I could jump in on that one,
Yeah,
and
good.
I looking while Clark also, while Tom also scrolls. I think a little further up at the beginning of paragraph D, where we say mitigation of development of significant impacts, just before we go into those paragraphs there. Yes. We have language in there that makes it clear that, provided such mitigation is reasonably related to and proportionate to any impact presented by the proposed development. That starts, yep, there's that. There's also the other language I was just reading, Tom, that starts about it, the end of line 2 and continues on to.
Oh yeah, 3 lines down on the.
Yep. That language, Clark, was very deliberately chosen.
Yes.
Proportionate and reasonably related, because that comes right out of, the Supreme Court decisions on, you can't just extract money from somebody, but
Hey, we need a new bridge.
yeah, exactly. I need a new police
exactly.
station, and then so you can get your, addition.
Okay, but how do we define what's proportionate to? And again, I'm just trying to figure out if there's a layman's understanding that would be useful for the floor of town meeting at the very least. Are we talking more than 2% and less than 5% of the value of the project?
I would say that's probably very likely to be the case, less than 5%.
Right.
I mean, this isn't supposed to be about pushing the outer limits and how much can we get, or we've got some deep
I
pockets,
know.
right? And you
Yes.
can certainly see some concern that, a particular board might push for as much as they can. I don't know if we want to necessarily put an outer limit.
No.
And say, provided, in no event shall the value of the mitigation be more than 5% of the value of the construction. I mean, I don't know that we want to be boxed in quite like that.
Yeah, and that was my complaint about the Hanover bylaw, that it
Mhm.
puts
Too
dollar figures
specific,
in there.
right? And then
Yeah,
outdated. But 2 to
and then it
5%
becomes, it could
is
become,
different than unit price.
well, what I would suggest if you wanted to discuss that, because we're going to be looking at regulations, since we're moving things to regulations before town meeting. You know, if you wanted to put something in on a quantity or a limit, I would only do it by regulation so it can be easily changed. That the Hanover thing is unwieldy now to
Okay,
to,
that's
you
fine
know,
if it
to
lives
update the
somewhere.
prices. Just
I
save
just
that
think
for a regulation debate.
that somebody thinking about doing a development project is gonna wanna know what's the range of my mitigation in addition to additional costs for their pro forma.
I think anyone that comes in for that type level of, like you said, tens of millions of dollars is gonna have a good idea of those costs before they entertain the idea of developing in a town like ours. So I don't think we need to necessarily get to specify that here. I mean, like Carolyn says, case law is gonna define this stuff and the outer limits of this
Yeah.
thing. So, you know, and what we put in here, whether it's some percentage, someone's gonna find it too high and someone's gonna find it too low. We can be sure of that.
I just want to make a point of information, which is, in a lot of cases of the circumstance which leads to the deterioration of a road as it relates to the construction of a new residence, both the town and the water service are responsible. Both the town, the water service, and the residents are responsible for costs related to the operation of water. And it just depends on how the water system is actually configured. So for example, north and south water is actually probably responsible for coming back out to Howe Road and actually raising the pipe, the main pipe that goes into the access pipe that then feeds the house. So the residents may end up with a much smaller bill than we think. That's just a point of information. So, you know, we're trying to figure out how much it is. It's not going to be, it may end up being something, you know, marginally different, but not gigantic.
Anybody else? Do we have a member of the public out there?
Tom, the only other thing that jumped out at me was under section D, number 3, mitigation for loss of trees and vegetation, the 5,000 square foot threshold. Carolyn, was that from one of the other examples, or is this something we should focus on?
It's just to put some sort of minimum threshold that, you know, I don't think we necessarily are saying, you know, you remove one tree and therefore there has to be mitigation for the loss of that one tree, that it would have to be something a little bit more significant, but
Right.
but certainly you could play with the 5,000.
Well, could it be, you know, some square footage or a percentage of the total area?
Yes, it could. Mhm.
Okay.
Well, that's how we have it specified, 5,000 square feet, right? Some
Yeah.
sort.
Yeah, and no matter what the size, I mean, on a 5,000 square feet on 50 acres is minimal. 5,000 square feet on a quarter acre lot is
Yeah.
half of it. So, I'm wondering if this needs more,
A
refinement.
percentage instead.
Or at least we should talk about it.
I think you know, when we're conditioning bylaw based on our sense of how people will feel when something comes up and they want to try to do it. And I don't know if we point out too many things, I think we're gonna get ourselves into trouble. I think we want a general measure of, circumstance. And I don't think we can condition it on the basis of our three different, general, land categories, land use categories for residential areas.
One thing, if we keep, I thought there was some discussion about taking this out because it was duplicative of Concom jurisdiction. But now just sitting here, since we talked about the clearing limits, remember we have clearing limits. And you are allowed to clear a site up to a certain percentage of the lot, a new lot. So I thought about maybe we need to add this. Because if we want mitigation for a quantity that is within the acceptable clearing limits, you know, if it's you know, yes, you can clear, but yes, we may require you to do mitigation for it.
The rule for Concom is pretty liberal. You
Yeah,
know, it's,
I mean, I don't get mind keeping it in, but I'm thinking, since we discussed clearing earlier, we should have some qualification here. Carolyn, would you agree? Or?
Yeah, I do. I'm just going back to the land alteration bylaw and where we have for undeveloped and unimproved lots.
Yeah, we have it expressed as a percentage of the lot. not
Correct,
square footage.
correct.
Right, the single family was 70%, if I remember correctly, other percentages for different types of zoning.
Right, 70% of lot area in the RA, RB, and RZ, so your residential zones, 85% in the HB, Village, Harbor, and 3A commercial districts.
Yeah, so.
Right, that's why the 5,000 square feet, because it could be a small percentage or a large percentage,
yeah, it's really hard. It's just,
jumped out at me.
yeah. It's hard to actually, make sense of it from the standpoint of the differences in the size of the lots. And we would then also probably end up with situations where people want to condition whatever the estimation is based on what the developable size of the lot is, right? So the lot may be 15,000 feet, but only 5,000 of it can actually be developed writ large. So then why would they, you know, put themselves in a position of having to do, you know, an unusual portion of the total lot?
Right, and the mitigation, if required, it says, replace all of it on site, whatever you have to take out.
Well,
All of
that's
and
why
is
I
that
raised in the
shall
last,
be required to replace.
yeah, well, so that's why I raised the question of the previous bylaw in terms of what the Concom is dealing with is, you know, the removal of noxious material on property that, you know, people are now currently hamstrung and can't remove it. And they're now loosening what they're considering because they realize that the ecological consequences of getting rid of a non-native and potentially noxious species is a good idea. So, you know, we might want to, you know, talk to the current chairperson of Concom to get some specification about that, what they're doing at least.
You know, if it's 50% of the development site, instead of shall be required to replace, equal area, would it be shall be required to replace some or as
I'm sorry.
agreed to by special permit?
I'm sorry, I had to step away a minute. What?
So, if it's 50% and
Yeah, it's
I
just an
guess the next
idea.
issue is shall be required to replace of an equal area on site. If not possible on site, on somebody else's land with a easement or something, constructed a conservation restriction or something like that. I'm not sure that's what we want here. I mean, it's also like if, you know, using a 10-acre site, if you're gonna disturb more than 5,000 square feet, then you got to replace the same amount. I mean, I'm not sure it works.
Well, I think you're right, especially if folks are gonna be allowed to clear, let's just take, the residential. Well, maybe not take the residential because they won't be subject to the bylaw. Let's take, 85% in some of the commercial zones.
Right.
You remove 85% of the vegetation. You're removing it again because you're putting in some sort of a commercial structure, hotel, restaurant, whatever it's gonna
Sure.
be. I don't know that you have enough room remaining on that lot.
Yeah, so
Put it back as a 1-for-1.
Right. I mean, if you have 85% and you're gonna move the remaining 15%,
let me suggest,
moving it and replacing that, maybe that makes sense. So you have some vegetation for screening and buffers and things like that, which may not be in its original location. That might make sense, but
let me,
having a trigger of 5,000 square feet and of equal value doesn't make any sense to me.
let me suggest this, whether we use 5,000 square feet or 50%, doesn't matter, but we have this clearing bylaw, so we have to address it. So I would take shall and make it may.
Mhm.
Then I would only say be required to replace such vegetation with the planting of trees and vegetation of an equal area off-site. I would get rid of the possibility of on-site because our other bylaw is allowing them to do it. So there'd be,
Okay, so
there'd be conflict with each other, so it would leave,
offsite without a conservation restriction would be like, okay, yeah, you can plant some trees, but then forget about it a year later. Cut those all down and develop that site.
Well, can I just add a little perspective?
I'm gonna think that the practical solution is gonna be the last one, contributing to the tree bank.
Right, right.
And
Yeah,
then
Carolyn was gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, in a different community where they had, like a similar tree preservation and replacement bylaw in place, they reached a point where they were finding you're getting some of the trees replaced on site, but no one can ever do a complete 1-for-1 replacement. So that more likely than not, what they're doing is they're making contributions to the town's tree bank or offering to plant trees off-site. But I will tell you, this one community was running out of places to designate off-site for trees to be
Sure.
planted.
Right. Yeah, new set of problems, right?
Right.
all right, so.
Yeah, I don't know if I think whatever the hearing is, if on-site is a preference, the board can articulate that at that time. Or the tree bank.
Mhm. And I hear what you're saying, Tom, about, just have it all be off-site or the tree bank. But I would think you do want some vegetation restored on site.
All right,
It can be useful for screening buffers and
I
shading.
know. I don't want to run into the argument that allowing this under one bylaw, and now you're telling us we have to mitigate for it under another bylaw. I mean, I suppose you could make that logically work, but so, but I still would take the shall and make it may
Mhm.
in terms of flexibility, but the question.
What about the 5,000 square feet?
Yeah, the question that remains is, do you go percentage or do you go square footage?
I mean, I think since we don't know what the size of any particular development is, it's gotta be a percentage.
I would tend to agree. The question just becomes, what is the percentage? Do you go with 50%? Or do you have it at least consistent with the land alteration bylaw? 85% seems kind of high, but that's certainly your call.
I would do 50%.
And it
Right.
says may, so it doesn't mean,
Rather than the square footage, which, yeah. Cause then 50% is, you know, whatever the lot size is, there's a proportionality to it that we're trying to reach, so.
And we should probably just raise another good point there, Tom, when you said lot. You know, this says 5,000 square feet of a development site, which would potentially consist of multiple lots.
right?
I think if we're going to do 50%, we should just say 50% of a lot.
Are you sure you mean that? Because again, the 50% of a development site could be 50 lots that are combined in some way, or maybe I'm not thinking about this correctly. I mean, a lot that gets merged with another lot is still one lot, not two lots anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So if a developer comes in with 50 lots, he's going to merge them as a
the
part of
clear-
his development plans.
Yeah, the clearing limit refers to lot too, so I think for consistency's sake, we should just. Where was it? No. All right. Anything else?
So are we gonna change that to, clearing over 75?
No, we're gonna. Whatever the clearing limits allow you to do, there's still gonna be a trigger of possible mitigation at a smaller level of 50%. It's all gonna be case by case.
Okay,
And again, this bylaw though is not covering a single house, which is subject to the, the clearing limit by itself, so. Just don't want, it's the same argument Woody was making about Article 8. We just don't want them to be in conflict with each other necessarily, so. All right,
Those are the only comments I had on what Caroline put together. I mean, I'd say it's it's interesting trying to quantify this stuff where it's been avoided, the specificity's been avoided for decades by the development and municipal communities.
Does
and I know at least one developer who was at the public forum, and they haven't said the development community hasn't said anything yet. Doesn't mean they won't at town meeting, but.
Right.
has anyone given any thought to that last paragraph there about historic resources?
Yeah.
Where we're specifically proposing to exclude whatever the resource is from the area proposed to be developed.
Yeah, I don't know. Cemeteries, we don't want anyone messing with cemeteries anyway.
I don't think anyone's going to be messing with the cemetery, but
I've seen the movie Poltergeist, so I know what happens.
and 'tis spooky season, but there's one argument to be made that if you've got some of these historic resources that once they're gone, they're gone. You can't really recreate them. On the other hand, if we say that they have to be excluded from the area to be developed, someone could argue, well, it's a partial regulatory taking of my land.
Right.
As opposed to maybe we just say, rather than we're saying that it shall be excluded from the area proposed to be developed, if we just make sure that they're suitably protected and the buffer is established on all sides of the historic resource.
so then it would be shall be exclusively protected? I mean, what's the word? Because we can change 4 words there and it'll be what you're saying. Right?
Right. So I think I would propose deleting on line 4, shall be excluded from the areas proposed to be developed. And I guess we could also get rid of that, including clearing of trees and vegetation, and simply combine that with the second sentence that a suitable buffer area to protect such historic resources as determined by the planning board or zoning board of appeals shall be established on all sides of each historic resource, such as cellar holes, farmsteads, stone corrals. I think I would kind of reorder it that way.
Yeah,
Okay, that sounds good.
Say that again. All right, so let me just,
Yeah, take that second sentence, a suitable buffer, and
Yeah.
put that at the beginning.
After mitigation for disruption of historic resources, right?
Right.
Keep that as the first sentence and then move the bottom sentence to the second sentence and then take the shall out.
Yep, so we're gonna get rid of that historic resources, structures and properties and just continue with such as cellar holes, farmsteads, etc.
I love it. What is a cellar hole? I mean, I can guess what it is, but is that, in Cohasset, somebody fell into an old well about 4 years ago, and he got locked in there for a whole night. And finally, the person in the house that he was living with wandered around long enough and couldn't find him and went out in the backyard, and there he was in the hole. And they called the fire department.
I think there's one in that park that's on Beechwood Street that from Ozzie Ingram.
A cellar hole?
I think when well, there's certainly an old foundation, whether it was a cellar or not, it's hard to tell, but if you go on the path all the way out toward where it abuts the railroad track, there's something out there. It was a
that's right,
foundation.
like a
It
old
wasn't a
foundation.
cellar. It was a foundation or a cellar, but it's out there.
Perfect for Halloween,
All right, so this is better the way it's reading now.
If one of these structures is abutting a water feature, how do you establish a buffer on the side of that has a water feature? We have a cemetery that operates on Little Harbor, and so part of that might apply here. Marked graves, and then it's on the water. How would you establish a buffer on the side of a water? I see all sides in here.
Yeah,
don't know
no,
what-
that's a great point, Kevin. I think that actually becomes a natural buffer, to be honest with you. If the idea is that, look, we want to protect it so that, it's not whatever, the graves are not impacted by some sort of development. Nobody's going to be putting anything on the harbor side, right? So that's going to be your sort of natural buffer. If room would allow, you might even say, look, we want you to provide a 15-foot protective barrier or protective buffer between the limits of development and the grave sites. Or we might even say, we want you to actually vegetate that buffer to provide, more delineation and protection. But I think being right up against a water body, I think that becomes your natural buffer, at least on that side.
Okay. All right, we all set with this now? As amended? Gonna have to put an explanation box on the end of this. I'll work on that, but. All right, then I'm gonna make a motion that we move to recommend passage of PB5 as it has been amended this evening and is showing on the screen at the moment.
Second.
Second, thank you. All right. Alphabetical roll call, all in favor?
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Heine.
Deirdre Hobson, I.
Birgit Schmidt-Wisch, aye.
Okay, good, thank you. All right, Do we have to talk about the ADUs? Did we vote on it, or do we have to talk about anything here?
That one is all set.
Okay.
I did, however, and I apologize for this, I did make a couple of edits as I was going back through this document yesterday. You know, it's ever evolving with information that we're getting from the state or
Oh, yeah.
webinars and all this other stuff. So I tweaked it a little bit. I didn't really change anything substantively.
Other than we took out the caps, that's so.
Yes, we took out the caps because you wanted to take that out. So that was perfectly fine. You know, the only thing, if we have the ADU up, this would be under paragraph B, special accessory use regulations, and it would be paragraph, well, it probably should be, it's a subparagraph 1A.
Yeah,
We say no more than one ADU may be permitted on a lot.
yeah.
We can keep that in. But the conventional wisdom that I'm hearing right now is that one ADU by right was certainly allowed by the state legislation, and that more than one ADU could also be allowed, but by special permit. I'll be the first to say I don't subscribe to that opinion, but
Yeah.
I wanted you to be aware of it because this is, you know, obviously, I think by the time we actually, you know, we're gonna prove this at, you know, the December town meeting, and then the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities is probably going to come out with guidance in January.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't
I-
know that we
I
necessarily
think
want to
the
encourage.
fear, one of the fears might be that somebody wants to develop a community of tiny houses somewhere, and that might be objectionable to the neighbors because it's not a lot different than a trailer park.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not sure we want to encourage that, and, yeah. If we want to develop a smaller community, I think we mess with our residential cluster bylaw to deal with that possibly, you know, to encourage that kind of development. If that's something we want to do, I think that's where we would do it.
I had suggested that all these regulations, exceptions to them, in addition to the over 900 square feet, be subject to a special permit. Not knowing what particular circumstances people might find, like the if you have a two-family property and you have plenty of room for an accessory dwelling unit, might be reasonable to put an accessory dwelling unit on that site some places, but not others, and the special permit process with the ZBA can handle that. But I believe, Tom, you were not for that, and I don't remember exactly what other sentiments were.
Yeah, I don't recall either, so.
Could-
All right,
Could
I
I,
think I was resigned to say, yeah, whatever. That's fine.
I
I
know that,
mean, in the
I
future,
believe
if no ADUs get built in the next 10 years, even with this bylaw change, maybe we open it up a little bit more. We
Yeah,
can always do that later.
yeah, or maybe the state forces the issue on us, so.
Sure,
you know.
right.
All right, so should we just?
could I just ask, raise two other things and see if the board wants to do anything about them? On the page that you have showing, could we just scroll up just a little bit to, it'd be a subparagraph B that reads, an ADU will not be permitted on a lot on which more than one principal dwelling is located. Yeah, right there at the top.
Yeah.
Again, the wisdom from the Attorney General's office is that the Affordable Homes Act specifically says that you can have one ADU on the same lot as a principal dwelling. And if that principal dwelling is a duplex, then they're reading that as you could have two ADUs.
Well. again, I don't know that that's something we want to encourage, and if that leads to litigation someday, so be it.
Or it might just be that the Attorney General strikes the provisions of the bylaw that they think might be inconsistent with
Right.
the act, and we just, at least as long as we go into that with our
Yeah.
eyes wide open.
Yep.
Then the last thing I just wanted to raise is on this same page here. It's the subparagraph F that I've actually crossed out, but I want to explain. The new act says we can't require a special permit or any other discretionary permit for a by right ADU. But the statute has not addressed the issue of, well, what happens if you have a pre-existing non-conforming residential dwelling and they want to put a 900 square foot addition on it that otherwise would have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit finding to alter it. I don't think that the Affordable Homes Act intended to do away with that step of going to the Zoning Board of Appeals. But there are others that feel that no, and they said no special permit, you can't send them someplace else. This 900 square foot ADU is indeed by right. So I was proposing just deleting this language from the bylaw just to sort of be silent on the issue. And when we're faced with our first pre-existing non-conforming house that wants to put on an ADU by right, we cross that bridge when we come to it. Or we could keep paragraph F in and force the AG to either approve or disapprove it.
Yeah. I mean, there are different special permits, even though the special permit is like, there's half a dozen different types of special permits for existing non-conforming
Mhm.
and then a special permit for an ADU. And while there's not relief for what would be required for expanding an existing non-conformity, that doesn't have anything to do with the ADU special permit. I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with other types of special permits either.
Right, I would agree with that the use can't be subject to the special
Okay,
permit.
all right, yeah,
But the physical addition,
yeah,
especially if
good, yeah,
what if that pre-existing non-conforming house, the only way to put that ADU on is by further exacerbating a non-conformity or even, creating a variance situation.
yes.
I don't think that this Affordable Homes Act was intended to say none of that will apply.
I agree. I think it would be unreasonable to
Mhm.
do that. I mean, Belalta and Comstock allow you to increase existing nonconformities, but it's still subject to the special permit, which is different than the ADU special permit. The ADU would be as of right. The building, the overall configuration of the building, if it's existing non-conforming, would be special permit. I wouldn't take out the F language. I'd leave it and see what happens. On the other hand, some of my
I
developer
apologize.
friends might like
That
a certain
noise is-
amount of flexibility, and no, I think it's a practical consideration here.
I would take F out. That's my thought in a nutshell.
So someone want to break that tie?
Tom, do we disagree on everything? Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Nice meeting.
No, I mean, I'm seeing it crossed out because council, I think, is leaning toward that recommendation, and I will agree with that. Okay, I don't have a
Well,
strong
I will say
feeling
this,
either
I
way
crossed
about
it out, but I don't know that it's going to solve the problem. If we keep it in there and the Attorney General strikes it, then we know exactly where she stands.
All right, well, then keep it. And we'll see what happens. They don't know what they're doing
Nope.
with this new law yet either, so we'll see. All right, okay, there it is. Anything else we have to think about with this?
No, I think that was it.
No. Okay.
we
All
have
right,
to
then
vote on
I'll
this
just ask that we reaffirm.
Yeah.
I'll ask that we just, a motion that we reaffirm our recommendation to pass PB 6 with the edits that Carolyn has made
So moved.
that are shown on the screen. All right. I moved in your second, and then, okay, so all in favor?
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye. Amy,
I said, I,
okay, didn't hear it, sorry.
Kevin Hyde, aye.
Okay, Birgit, you can vote as well. if you're
You're
interested.
not there anymore. Yeah. Birgit Wittby shy.
Thank you. And I guess we lost Deirdre for the moment. That's fine. All right, so that concludes what we had from public hearings. Now, we are going to have to do another quick public hearing to do this change for whatever it's called, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities now.
Right.
Whatever. They want us to reconcile our watershed protection bylaw with the new MBTA Communities Overlay District. So let me close this. Stop
Actually,
this.
it might still be in that. Oh, okay.
What now? Was it in there?
I did put it in as PB 11, but you
All right, hold on. then I'll-
separately if that's easier.
What is the issue? Is there an exclusion for multifamily in the water resource protection district?
No, the issue was that there are some special permit requirements in the water resource district bylaw. And we can't subject the MBTA multifamily use to a special permit. So they wanted that to be clarified.
So I guess, so we're not making our recommendation because we have to have the public hearing on it, but Carolyn has presented us with two options for what the bylaw should look like that we're going to notice for the public hearing. So tonight we want to pick the option of which one we're going to notice for the public hearing and bring forward to town meeting. I take it, I have to deal with something right here, but in a minute, but Carolyn, if you could explain it, right, I'm taking it from your comments that the folks that wrote this bylaw for us, the overlay by, with MBTA overlay bylaw, and you seem to have some disagreements. The other thing I would just mention to you that the Water Resource District has become section 9.3, so we have to change.
Okay,
that.
okay.
And somewhere there is the redone text of 9.3 on my computer to, so make sure we reference all the right subdivisions.
Correctly, okay.
I can do that, but so if you could, I'll unfortunately gonna just, no, maybe, no, he's gonna sit down. Good, okay. If you could just explain the two options and what you recommend, which one we should proceed with.
Well, I'll put my bias up front because we've been at this for a while. And I think option one makes the most sense to simply amend the existing MBTA, so the Route 3A MFO district, to make it clear that we say that it shall not be subject to the requirement for special permit as specified under the Water Resource District, and we'll make that change to section 9.3. You know, that the consultant had just identified, and I recognize these numbers are wrong, but the consultant had said just exempt, you know, the multifamily, the MBTA multifamily use from sections 14.4C3 and 14.4C4, which have to do with septic systems.
Yeah.
But when you go to the Water Resource District, you know, there's also what I pointed out, you could require a special permit if more than 2,500 square feet of impervious surface is added. And I cannot think of a multifamily project that isn't going to trigger that threshold as well. So I would just say we exempt it we take option one and exempt the MBTA multifamily from any special permit requirement of the Water Resource District.
Do we know, is the entire MBTA district that we've created in the water resources at the same time, or is it just part of it?
I believe it's all of it.
All of it?
The Water Resource District is a good portion of town.
Right, okay. So we would just be exempting an MBTA project from the septic restrictions under the water resources thing, but everything else. Now, is the fact that we would have to go through a water resource special permit run into a problem with their wanting these districts as of right?
I think that's
Or
exactly,
at least letting us protect our water supply while they shove this down our throat.
well, again, at least as far as our MBTA zoning is concerned, the multifamily developments that have to be allowed there, the idea is that they're not supposed to be subject to special permit requirements.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean other developments, obviously, in the Water Resource District will still be subject to the special permit requirements.
All right, so are you suggesting we exempt it from all of the water resource?
All of the special permit requirements of the Water Resource.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
So all of it, all right, that's fine, I get that. The uses wouldn't be, the use restrictions in the water resources district wouldn't be thrown out, but the special permit requirements would be.
And only for the multifamily housing under the MBTA zoning.
Okay, all right. So we'll say the language really will be, shall not be subject to the requirement for special permits as specified in section 9.3. We don't
Correct.
even have to get into subsections.
Correct.
Okay. I believe, if I'm correct, I looked it up earlier. I believe it's 9.3, but Carolyn, double check that. I mean, Cassandra, if you could double check that.
Yep,
please.
I'll double check that tomorrow.
I'm running a zoo here at the house. All right, so then so does everybody understand that? And then what would option 2 be, just as a comparison? What, option 2 would be to make the change in the water resource bylaw rather than the MBTA bylaw?
Right. And I think it's actually cleaner. If somebody's looking to do an MBTA multifamily project, they're already in that section of the bylaw. And I think it makes more sense to just put it right in there.
Okay. All right, so for tonight's purposes, folks, we just have to choose between these two options of the one we're gonna bring forward. Ultimately, I would see this in our warrant lineup as coming up close to the top, because like the floodplain thing, I don't think this is a major change. It's just, we can always blame it, we're complying with the state's last minute application, but,
Can I get
So-
some clarification on this before we move on, Tom?
yeah,
There's a purpose for a special permit within this district. And if this is exempt from the special permit, is there still a requirement that this MBTA project substantially comply with the requirements of the permit, but don't have to apply for the permit? I mean, there's a reason there's a permit there. It's to protect the
know, but
watershed and
but
the resource.
The state in its wisdom has said that we need multifamily housing and you can't restrict it with a special permit process. Now, in our case, by coincidence, it happens to be in our water resource district, but as Cassandra says, it's a good chunk of the town is. I'm sure that might be the case in another community too.
But
And
but
they-
but
and
there's
maybe
there's
the
permits, and then there's substantially required, there's the permit, there's the act of getting the permit. And then there's the act of complying substantially with the requirements of a permit, but not necessarily being required to get a permit.
Well, I think, as Carolyn, I just asked her, the use restrictions within our water resource district bylaw are not being thrown out here. So they wouldn't be able, in the course of developing a multifamily project,
also add to it some particularly noxious use that's prohibited. At least that's how I'm hearing it, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, but, the bylaws would coexist, we just can't make them go through the added special permit to develop their project.
Right. And I think to your concern, Kevin, where the multifamily for the MBTA project becomes a by right use, there really isn't much of an option to require, substantial compliance. I'm trying to remember, I don't have your MBTA community bylaw in front of me. Did we require site plan review, however?
I vaguely remember
Yeah,
that,
we
but I
did.
Yes, I believe
try
we
to pull it
did.
up.
Yes.
Okay. So, is there an opportunity maybe to address some of these concerns through site plan review? Yes, but it won't be quite as vigorous as it would be as if they were applying for a water resource special permit.
I mean, without knowing the specifics of the special permit and what it covers here. I'm just thinking, and I'm thinking out loud here, if this was a big residential building and it was done in an area of water resources, that if it wasn't an MBTA community's big residential development, but it would have to go through the special permit process given its location. There's a reason for that, and it's my understanding is it would be to protect that water resource, okay? And it may be because there's some nuance to that residential development that could potentially negatively impact that water resource. And that's why it's required to go through and apply for the special permit. If we aren't necessarily requiring them to apply for it, I just would want to know that there's still the protection in a review process to make sure they're not going to put in, let's say, or there's some thought with regard to, okay, they're putting in this big residential MBTA building here, and it's also going to have backup power supply, and they're going to be storing X amount of fuel associated with that within this area of the water district that would typically fall under and be a part of the review process if they applied for a special permit. If they don't have to apply for the special permit, I would still want to know that there's some protection and provisions in there that they would still have to substantially meet. And there would be a review of that somehow, instead of they just don't have to apply for the permit and can move on with it. That's where I'm thinking with regard to this in our amendments here. If they don't have to if we're not requiring the permit of them, is there still a requirement, and can we have them substantially comply with the requirements of that?
I'm gonna stop the share a moment so I can share something else here. Where was it? I just had it. All right. You see this? This is the Water Resources Protection District part of the bylaw. This is when it was still under Article 14. So here is the section we have: uses and activities requiring a special permit. And so there's a bunch of uses that are prohibited, by the way, that, noxious uses, storage tanks, underground storage tanks, storage of hazardous materials. Those are uses that are prohibited. The uses that require the special permit. So storage of home heating oil. I don't know, how are large, Clark, how are large?
250 gallons is the standard. So this is 120% of standard.
For a large building?
I'm sorry, for a single family house, it would be
All right,
250
yeah,
gallons.
I don't know what for a large building is, but there's something that might come in.
They're
that
never
would-
gonna, nobody heats with oil in commercial
Alright.
anymore.
Okay, all right. On-site sewage disposal of more than 10,000 gallons per day, that's pretty big. On-site disposals having a sewage flow in excess of 60 gallons per day. All right, so this one they'll be walking away from. They'll be walking away of this from this impervious material restriction that Carolyn pointed out, because any multi-building development's going to have a lot of impervious material. More than a minor removal of existing trees, more than 70%. Well, you know, we have a mitigation bylaw too now. You know, we would be passing that with, you know, part of my argument to town meeting is the mitigation bylaw is there in large part to prepare for the MBTA district. So those are the things right there that would be, that could be brought up by a project here and what would no longer need a special permit. I don't know if that's significant or not. I think the biggest one is the one that might most come into play is the one about on-site sewage disposal. And yet the on-site sewage disposal is also going to be subject to regulation by the Board of Health. Possibly, given where we put the district, by the Concom. Well, there are, you know, again, you asked the question, so I don't know if this, but again, you know, I also don't know if we have a choice here. Because this is another one of these state mandates that says, we don't care what your local bylaw is doing, you can allow these things as of right.
Well, I guess I would just suggest then perhaps can we say, okay, you don't need a permit, but you must substantially comply with it, and then let the Attorney General strike that language if they so wish.
Please.
I guess I would ask
maybe-
Carolyn to that point if you were to go that route. Because right now, the AG's office has approved the current language. It's EOHLC that is disagreeing with this section, and they're not necessarily going to just say, oh, just strike that. So I think whatever language we propose, we have to go in assuming that that is going to be what it is versus seeing whether or not they recommend taking it out.
Right, I was actually trying to call up the MBTA zoning bylaw that we passed in May, just to see what it said about site plan approval. And I've only just gotten to the bylaw itself. My thought would be if the concerns are, we want to make sure these things are looked at, that we amend the MBTA zoning bylaw to add some of these concerns in for site plan review, because I don't know that all of this typically gets reviewed under, say, your usual site plan review.
Let me ask you this, would we be able to do a regulation regarding this district where we could add some of these concerns to the site plan review process for just this district?
I'm going to say possibly to that, Tom, because I think the state wants to see the bylaws. And we have to go through both the Attorney General and then EOHLC, both of whom have to, you know, approve and certify the bylaw. If we're doing this through a regulation, they don't see it.
All right.
Now,
In the site plan review bylaw,
mhm.
we added a paragraph that said, you know, in a project in the, I wouldn't even say the MBTA district, I'd say in the water resource district. Well, no. Any project that's subject to site plan review that's in the water resource district will also consider these factors, blah, 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 blah. And put that,
Yep.
put that right in the bylaw.
Yep.
And maybe we make that part of this amendment process. So it's a two-step article, still simple to explain to everybody, but we have to make this change. And because we have to essentially exempt these projects in this district from this other bylaw, we're doing this amendment to the site plan review bylaw just to try to cover for it. And if the AG strikes down the site plan part, fine. You know,
I mean, they've already approved the bylaw, and right now it just refers to, site
now
plan
they're gonna
review
have to
pursuant
approve-
to 12.7.
yeah, they're gonna have to approve this amendment, so
Mm-hmm.
they looked at this amendment and we picked option one to deal with the conflict between the two districts, and then, step two of the warrant article is and amend 12.7 to add this paragraph. They might just strike the second part if they don't like it, if they think we're being too cute,
Mm-hmm.
or we do that at a later time. You do the 12.7 amendment at a different, I don't know.
I know, because we're starting to run out of time for making this town meeting.
All right,
We're
so-
we're very short on time, and also I'd like to point out to the board members that the AG's office and EOHLC are not necessarily talking to each other. So
All right, well then let's keep this simple then. I'll make a motion that for the purposes of the public hearing and what we will present to town meeting, we go with option one, as Carolyn has presented.
Second,
All right, any further discussion of it? All right, then alphabetical, all in favor?
Clark Brewer, aye.
Kelly and I.
Kevin High and I.
lost Amy.
All right.
Birgit, you get to vote.
Birgit, you get the vote.
And Birgit Schmidt, aye, but we are still not five, right? We're
No,
four.
we're okay. We're good.
We're
We
good.
just need a majority.
Yeah,
Got
four is a quorum, so we're good. All right. So then I think we've gotten through everything we have to do tonight.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
We have a meet.
Before we
have a meeting
adjourn,
next Wednesday.
Oh,
I feel like now that we've decided which option of the language, we should clarify when we are going to be holding the public hearing for this.
I'll leave that to you to schedule it as quickly as you can do it that meets all the statutory requirements.
So realistically, at this point, we're looking at November, since that's right around the corner.
Yeah.
Carolyn, in terms of like scheduling it, I was talking to Tracy today, in terms of scheduling it, like with the warrant and everything else that has to be considered.
Mhm.
How, not that I want to push this off for as long as possible, but like what are we thinking for a timeline? Because the regularly scheduled meetings are the 6th, which we can't do because that's too soon, and the 20th. And I don't know if the 20th is too late.
When are we going to print?
I believe when I talked to Tracy today, she said that they were going to print the first week of November. So the idea was that this would get included, but wouldn't have the votes,
Okay.
and that
that's
they would
fine.
be a manager's motion. Does that make sense, Carolyn?
Yeah, or just that the planning board's vote on this particular amendment would have to be announced by the moderator prior to voting on it. Because I mean, the warrant can go to print with just the language, the proposed bylaw language. We don't have to have recommendations in there. I mean, I think you're right, just looking at this in terms of, you can't, we're really looking at sometime that first full week of November for a public hearing to be able to get your legal ad in the paper for 2 weeks. You're really looking at any time from, say, November 6th on.
Why can't we do the 6th?
You could.
Yeah, you could. It would be real tight, and I wanted to make sure that we were, because
Do we
I
have
think-
other business the 6th?
no, not as of yet.
All right, then let's just do what has to be done for the 6th. Let's get this done as quickly as we can.
Okay.
That's my thought about it. I don't want to drag everybody out for another meeting on the 13th if we can avoid it. 20th is too late.
Agreed. I will do the newspaper ad for that tomorrow.
And next week we have a meeting with regular business.
Yes, next week you have 82 Border Street. And a request for a modification to a prior site plan review to determine if the modification would be minor or major, for purposes of potentially scheduling a public hearing. I'm gonna send out like a detailed informational email about that tomorrow.
Okay. All right, Carolyn, thank you for your edits and everything. Let me play with this of getting things in, because I'm gonna start to reorder them in the way I'd like to see them go on the warrant. Do we know, and Cassandra, if you can find out what numbers were being assigned in the warrant, that would help. Yeah.
I don't know that Tracy knows the numbers as of yet, but when I talked to her earlier, she just asked that tomorrow, if I could send her the order that you would like them in, and then she could just plug in the article numbers from
Right.
there.
I'm in court in the morning, but I'll try to get something out tomorrow.
That's fine. I can always go by your
I'll- you
prior
know,
emails as well.
You can just tell her if they need to go back to the select board at their pleasure. I'll deal with the zoning board and the advisory committee. If they meet Wednesdays, let's just figure out a time when we can do it.
My understanding is that select board would request that you come back on the 29th
October.
of October. And I believe that advisory is going to be meeting next Wednesday.
Which again conflicts with our meeting.
Yes, so either you can present and miss this meeting, or I can have Julia cover the planning board meeting and I can present,
All right,
whichever your pleasure.
yeah, we'll talk about that. I don't know. I wouldn't be able then to vote on the two projects of next week. But that depends. All right, well, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Cassandra, are you all set then for the language for the change to the MBTA zoning, or do you need some help with the legal ad for that?
I was just gonna essentially copy and paste it.
That works.
That seemed as simple as
Yeah,
enough.
it's a pretty straightforward one. I just figured I'd
Yeah,
ask because
Just
the
note
sooner
that
you
this,
can get that out, the faster this moves along.
Yeah, I was just gonna copy and paste it and
yeah,
put it out tomorrow.
just that this is just my version, though. Just make sure that the reference is to section 9.3.
Mm.
Okay. All
Can
right.
you, Tom, can I just request that you, since you have court in the morning, just send me that document tonight and then I'll just have it in my email and you can rearrange it later.
I can do that.
Thank you.
All right. Everyone, thank you for your attention tonight. We'll see you next week. So there was a motion by Clark to adjourn. I'll second that. All in favor? I think Clark's already adjourned, so Tom
Yeah.
Callahan and I.
You've lost your quorum, so I think it's
All right, well, that's
automatic
all
at this
right. We're
point.
adjourned, so,
I think it's
okay.
only the three of us remaining here at this
All
point.
right. Thank you all for your
Take
help.
care.
Good night, all.
Bye.
Okay, good
Thanks.
night.